This video brought to you by EquestrianCoach.com, the world's leading equestrian education source.
Until the early 1900s, there was only one basic system of schooling, classical dressage, otherwise referred to as the classical high school system or manège schooling. The word dressage signified this, and horses were schooled based on collection. The rider's position was based on his seat, not in his stirrups, and the horse was schooled to be in central balance, not forward balance, in order to perform the required objective of quality collected gaits in a small, flat arena. All jumping horses during that time period utilized dressage-based practices, relying heavily on the full seat. Riders were advised, even by masters such as Boucher and Phyllis, when jumping obstacles, they should use their hands to both help the horse to lift the front during takeoff and hold the horse up when landing. Riders were instructed to bend their body back from the hips upward over the cantle. This position was thought to lighten the forehand and help the rider keep his seat and support his horse in case the animal's forelegs gave way. To the modern horseman, this riding technique not only looks ridiculous, but appears to be abusive to the horse as well. In spite of this, there were some early civilian pioneers in the hunting field and on the racetrack that began experimenting with a forward posture over and in between jumps. Here's a quote from Bill Steinkraus, Olympic gold medalist, scholar, and historian. Although military riding instruction was reluctant for a long time to permit or encourage riders to lean forward, sporting art from the 18th and 19th centuries show many fox hunters and, with the advent of steeplechasing in the early 1800s, race riders and point-to-pointers doing so. The first written reference I have found to this practice appears in Joseph Simpson's 25 Actions of the Manège Horse, published in London, 1729, which appends 2 engravings of the English hunter and a brief text describing the hunting seat. Riders should sit light and humor the horse's motions by inclining the body. Photographs of civilian high jumpers at the beginning of the 20th century also document riders inclined forward and giving their jumpers a lot of freedom to extend their necks. Toward the end of the 19th century, American jockey Todd Sloan, while racing in the UK, debuted his own unique riding style, utilizing short stirrups and balancing forward over the horse's neck and withers. The British called his distinctive position the monkey crouch, and the new seat began to gain acceptance. American show jumper Dick Donnelly was breaking high jump records on show jumping Hall of Famer Heather Bloom in the early 1900s with an unequivocal forward seat. But it was in Italy at the turn of the 20th century that an actual system evolved at the Italian Cavalry School under the influence of a cavalry officer named Federico Caprilli. The Caprilli system, introduced in 1904 and completely adopted by the Cavalry School by 1907, set the foundation for the modern forward riding system. Here we see Italian cavalry officers in 1929 at the Cavalry School Torre demonstrating their riding and jumping skills with the relatively new forward riding methods introduced into the Italian cavalry by Federico Caprilli. Riders were now being taught to follow the forward motion of the horse with their balance in the stirrups rather than the seat. Their balance in the stirrups, security in their seat, and independence of their arms demonstrate style one would be envious of today. According to Caprilli, the first rule of good riding is that of reducing, simplifying, and sometimes, if possible, even eliminating the action of the rider. Horses were ridden in plain snaffle bits. Caprilli died in 1907, reportedly by a fall from a horse, but his system carried on through the teachings of cavalry officers such as Piero Santini, a major in the Italian light horse cavalry. Santini was a disciple of Caprilli and continued to advance Caprilli's methods throughout the early to mid-20th century. Santini, with an Italian father and American mother, spoke and wrote English as a second language. He is the author of 5 books, the first being Riding Reflections, published in 1932 in the United States. The Italians were quite generous about sharing their system, and officers from around the world went to study at the Italian cavalry schools Pinerolo and Tor di Quinto. America's Brigadier General Harry D. Chamberlain studied at both the French Saumur and Italian Tordi Quinto cavalry academies in the 1920s. He brought modern Italian and French concepts home to the U.S. Army Cavalry School at Fort Riley, where he taught and trained and wrote in the 1930s and early 1940s. Chamberlain's method was generally based on the Italian school of Caprilli. His books, which included the Fort Riley Cavalry Manual, set forth these ideas very clearly. Fort Riley pupils had an enormous influence on American riding from the 1930s through the 1970s. His book, Training Hunters, Jumpers, and Hacks, was quoted by Littauer as being one of the most influential books of the 20th century. Captain Vladimir Littauer of the Russian cavalry immigrated to the United States in the early 1920s, and with two other emigres founded the Boots and Saddles Riding School in New York. Littauer focused on instructing the civilian riding enthusiast as opposed to the cavalry rider, and his riding instruction was in great demand during his lifetime by both riding instructors and amateurs. He was an early, important, and controversial advocate of the forward seat riding system. He was the author of many books, and his book Common Sense Horsemanship was an absolute work of genius. Both Chamberlain and Littauer's works significantly advanced the schooling of the horse as the forward riding system developed. Gordon Wright, born in Goshen, Utah in 1903, started his horse career as a cowpuncher and rodeo rider. After a stint in the cavalry, he came east in 1927 and established in 1930 his business in Saxon Woods, White Plains, New York. Gordon produced more Maclay winners than any other trainer of his era, his pupils including Archie and Hugh Dean, Bill Steinkraus, Victor Hugo Vidal, and George Morris. Gordon's book, Learning to Ride, Hunt, and Show, is a must-read. Bert de Nemethy began his career as an officer in the Hungarian cavalry and as a member of the Hungarian Olympic jumping team. After World War II, he emigrated to the United States, where he became the coach of the United States Equestrian team, a post he held from 1955 to 1980. He led the team to sustained international triumphs in 6 Olympics, 5 Pan American Games, 4 World Championships, and countless international horse shows. Bert's book, The de Nemethy Method, is a vital text for any horseman. Bill Steinkraus, whose style epitomizes the American forward seat, participated in 5 Olympic Games. At the 1968 Summer Olympics held in Mexico City, he won a gold medal in individual jumping with the horse Snowbound. He obtained 2 silver medals in team jumping, first in 1960 on his Mount Zarda Spree, and in 1972 on Mainspring. Steinkraus also won a bronze medal in team jumping at the 1952 Olympics in Helsinki on Hollandia. His style of riding is timeless. Bill's book, Riding and Jumping, should be on everyone's bookshelf. George Morris is considered to be one of the most influential trainers in the history of equestrian sports. He has represented the U.S. as a member of the gold medal-winning USCT squad at the 1959 Pan American Games and the silver medal-winning team in the 1960 Rome Olympics. Between 1958 and 1960, he rode on 8 winning Nations Cup teams. In 1988, Morris won the biggest purse in show jumping history at Spruce Meadows, Canada. In later years, he served as chef d'équipe for numerous Nations Cup teams. George is the author of many great books and an instructor's clinician. Paul Cronin's understanding and advocacy of the American forward riding system is unsurpassed. For more than 30 years, Paul was a student of international horseman and educator Vladimir Littauer and took a semester's sabbatical to ride at the French National Military School in Saumur. Paul was a director of the riding program and head instructor at Sweetbriar College for 34 years. He currently serves as professor emeritus for the college, a position he's held since 2001. Paul's book, Schooling and Riding the Sport Horse, depicts the modern application of the American forward riding system. Since the turn of the 20th century to the present, there have been, and still are, many great riders, trainers, and teachers, too numerous to mention, who have and continue to modernize, improve, and contribute to this system.